everybody. So I want to get us started with our guest speaker, JB Friday. JB is the extension forester for the University of Hawaii. He works with landowners, tree farmers, and professional foresters throughout the state and across the Pacific on topics including forest health and rapid ohia death, restoration of native forests, silviculture of Hawaii's native acacia koa or koi tree, and agroforestry. Dr. Friday earned a bachelor's degree in biology from Dartmouth College, a master's of forestry from the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies, and a PhD in agriculture from the University of Hawaii. In addition to working in Hawaii, Dr. Friday has also done projects in Guam, Micronesia, the Philippines, and East Timor. So excited to introduce him as our guest speaker. He has a wealth of knowledge in everything forest, including rapid ohia death, and is here to speak about ROD in particular and what you folks can do to help prevent its spread. So mahalo, JB, for joining us, and I will let you take it away.
Yeah, mahalo, Serena. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and listening. This is our workshops, and we did with the combination with the ISKs and outreach and rapid ohia death, a number of projects for tour guides a few years ago. And I really think that was some of the most effective extension workshops we did, because it was multiplied so much that, you know, the tour guides talk to people every day. And, you know, there's so many people visiting Hawaii that us individually contacting visitors is impossible. With a multiplier, it really became very useful. And then one of the things that I think, I look at Allison, I'm sure she knows this, that didn't occur to me, is that what they told us is that, yeah, we really like to get as much information as possible because we're in a van for hours and hours and we really need things to say. And then and you on Maui are not facing this, but on Hawaii Island, if you drive around and see all the dead trees, you got to explain, oh yeah, this is this going on and stuff like that. The other thing with the guides is visitors are really easy, especially if they're eco-tour visitors, they're a really easy audience because they want to do the right thing. You know, a really tough audience we have is the roadside maintenance guys. That anytime we tell them to do something, it's taking them more time. It makes their life harder. And so they don't want to hear it. Whereas the visitors like, hey, everybody, we're going to clean our boots so we don't spread invasive species. All the visitors like, yeah, we're going to do that to protect the land here. You know, so it's the pleasant side of our outreach, even though sometimes it's bringing a little depressing news, but people want to cooperate with that, as opposed to some of the things we have to tell people, yeah, I know you want to do that, but you're not allowed to, is more of a downer. So let me start and share a presentation on rapid ohia death. Yeah, guys, I really second the stuff. And last summer I did a field day in person, and a talk in person, everything. Then it all shut down again. We're back to Zoom. So looking forward to be able to do stuff in person again. All right, rapid ohia death. Are we seeing the correct screen here? I hope.
Yep, looks good.
All right, that's me, JB Friday, Extension Forester, rapid ohia death. I will often say during this presentation, I mean the large group of people working on rapid ohia death, and there are several dozens of people. There are scientists and there are, you know, land managers, and the ISKs have been great partnerships in this. So when I say we, I mean the big group. These are not people that I supervise and boss around. These are just everybody cooperating on this. All right, this is what rapid ohia death can do. So this is the worst case. So this was a lowland ohia forest in Puna. Now on our island, and I don't know if we mentioned, I'm calling in from Hilo. So I'm in East Hawaii. On our island, we have a lot of native ohia forest in low elevations. You know, people in Maui think it doesn't even grow down the coast. Well, no, you can go in Puna down by the coast and see native ohia forest, you know, right at sea level. So this was in near Pahoa. So this was forest about 800 feet elevation, tall ohia forest, the native understory with llama and alahe'e and ha'iwale, the endangered Sertandra species that just exists on that part of Puna there. This is what it looked like. I was fortunate to visit it in 2005. This is what it looked like 10 years later with rapid ohia death. So this is the worst case. What you can see here is the ohia is all dead. The ikaha ferns up in the trees are getting fried from too much sun. The understory is being taken over by Clydemia and Maile Pilau. The forest is gone. You do see one green tree over here. Is that resistant to disease? Hold on, there may be an answer to that. So what is rapid ohia death? Rapid ohia death is a fungal disease of ohia. It's caused by a fungus in the genus Ceratocystis. Now, Ceratocystis causes diseases all around the world. And what you have is you have different species of Ceratocystis infecting a different tree. So there's one that kills mangoes in India and Pakistan, terrible pathogen. We don't have that here, fortunately. There's one that kills oak trees on the mainland. There's one that came from North America, went to Europe, and is killing the plane trees in the streets of Europe. So worldwide pathogen. One of the key things, and hold on to this, is it grows in the sapwood and enters through wounds. It doesn't form anything that you see on the surface of the tree. So it doesn't make conchs or mushrooms. Those are other fungi for there. And the mechanism it kills the tree is it blocks up the sapwood. And so water doesn't get to the leaves. And the external symptom is the leaves turn brown because there's been no water getting to them. Now, the fungus, again, it's in the sapwood. It's not in the leaves. It's not in the flowers. Fortunately, it's not in the seeds. So we can do seed banking by collecting the seeds without spreading rod. The symptoms, as I said, the symptoms are that the crown of the tree turns brown. Sometimes just a limb, the fungus, if it goes up and it blocks the vascular tissue of that limb, but often just the whole tree will turn brown. It can kill a tree in 2 weeks. The symptoms can appear in 2 weeks. It's not going to kill a tree in 2 weeks, but we first started noticing we were driving around and we see healthy trees. And then 2 weeks later, we drive through the same place and we see brown trees. It's like, wow, that was quick. Those trees were nice and green. What's turned out has happened is the fungus will grow through the tree for months or maybe a year first, and then symptoms develop. So it's kind of like a guy who's got, plaque building up in his arteries and he seems okay. And then one day he has a heart attack and goes over. One of the other things we noticed is large healthy trees were also infected. It's not a disease taking the stress trees and it doesn't have anything to do with stress. It doesn't have anything to do with soil fertility or any of these things. It is a virulent pathogen that takes out the healthiest trees there. Another thing is there are other things. I guess I'll tell you a little bit about some other symptoms that look like it. Saying a tree is rot is a lab diagnosis. So that's why, MISC, those 20 trees that you suspected and sampled, none of those had rod because the samples went into lab and said, nope, some other fungus killed them. Again, here are the symptoms. The crown. So for you guys driving around, you're going by an ohia tree and all the leaves are on the tree and turn brown. So the one with the guy on the chainsaw on the right, I drove past that spot probably once a week. And then one day I noticed the tree had turned brown. Sure enough, it was full of that. Now, other diseases, and let me throw this out. This is the rust, the Ostropyxinia rust that was mentioned a little bit ago. That's a foliar disease, right? You don't see any brown leaves. You see the leaves getting lost off the tree. So an ohia tree losing leaves is something else wrong. It's not rapid ohia death. On these trees here, this is Oahu. There was this outbreak on Oahu that a lot of the trees lost their leaves. But me looking at this forest says there's something going wrong there, but it's not rapid ohia death. And this, in this case, was this rust. In the top right picture here, you see that sulfur colored fungus pustules on that. That's the rust. Another thing you'll see, there's another pathogen that is just a branch fungus, usually Phomopsis. And if you just see one branch going down, that might be rod, but more likely it's this branch fungus. And if you look and you see how the branch is swollen and the bark's all cracked, that's not rod symptoms. So that's probably just something else on that. On Maui, I don't know how frequently you see this on Maui. If it's a large enough branch, it's not just something trivial, you might want to report that. But what is the most, here, you can put this in the chat. What's the most common thing that kills ohia in people's yards? I'll throw out a question here. Anybody want to hazard a chat on that? The most common thing that kills tree rooms. Yep. Although what I will say is, there we go, weed whacking. That's what I was going to say. Too much weed whacking and herbicide, right? So you do the Hawaii thing and you weed whack all around the base of your tree. And then you spray Roundup to kill all the grass to have this nice circle of brown under trees that people like to have. And that's people killing their own trees. So, you know, when you see trees like this, you look at them and go, yeah, that's the landscaper killing. Okay, getting on to Rod. So we saw a lot of trees dying with a lot of sampling because we were sampling the wrong thing first. We thought it was a root pathogen and not a stem pathogen. Eventually we got it defined by morphology to Ceratocystis, and we sent it to the lab in South America that is the world lab on this disease. And they did the phylogenetic tree. So this is like a family tree. What they found out is there's not one, but two new species of Ceratocystis. So it's no, they said, hey, guess what? Your samples don't match anything of the 1,000 isolates that we have in our custody here. So they don't match anything else at all. And guess what? You have two. And furthermore, the two of them aren't that closely related. So in the family tree, the one that is really causing most of this damage here is Ceratocystis leuco-ohia. Does anybody want to throw out a guess on what the word leuco means? I live in Hilo by the shores of the Wailuku River. Hints on that? Anybody's been in Hilo, been to Rainbow Falls and those other things? Wailuku is destructive. The Wailuku comes down in torrents and people drown there frequently because the water is so violent. So Wailuku is destroyer, so destroyer of Ohia. So when these were named, they were given Hawaiian names because they exist only in Hawaiian. The destruction, that's excellent. The other one is Huliohia, and don't think huli chicken, think your boat flips out at sea, right? Your canoe hulis when you're something like that. So that which overturns Ohia. So we gave them Hawaiian names, and there's two different species, and I'm getting in a little bit is how they behave differently. Where do we see Rod? On Hawaii Island. So this is a map of detections that were brought into the lab, and you will see there are large areas of forest with no detections. That doesn't mean there's any not any rod there. That just means nobody went into the deep forest. I mean, they follow roads. You know, I see a couple helicopter drops to get them. Almost all the Ohia forests on Hawaii Island have some rod in them. An exception is, it's not even mapped here. There's the Ohia forest here in Puakaloa training area. There's no rod. Puawa has no rod. So the dry forests have those two dry forests don't have rod in them. Onto the Maui story, and I think Serena already mentioned this, but there was one detection on Maui. It was it was Huliohia. Now, let's see. Let me get into a little bit the two species. The destructive one that has caused most of the damage on Hawaii Island is Leuco-ohia, destroyer of Ohia. The genetics tell us that that has arrived here something like 20 years ago, and it's been there about that long spreading, and it has spread very quickly across Hawaii Island. And for reasons that we do not understand, has shown up on Kauai and is now spreading across Kauai. That has not been found at all on Maui. Huliohia has been here a long time, and the genetics, the story about the genetics doesn't tell us anything about spread. The genetics on Leuco-ohia show us that it started here, and then it spread to here, and then it spread to here, and you could tell that by the diversity of the isolates. Huliohia, you don't see that. So whatever it did, it spread a while ago. Was it decades ago? Was it hundreds of years ago? Nobody knows. It really doesn't cause it doesn't cause that much mortality that we would have made it a big thing. So the level of mortality it caused would have escaped notice along with everything else that kills Ohia. That's what was found on Maui, and only in one instance. And as you mentioned, that tree was cut down, dug out of the ground, and burnt. So completely, that's it. So Maui has no active cases of either of the pathogens that cause rapid Ohia death. Why did it start on Hawaii Island and then show up on Kauai? We don't know. Maybe someone brought a load of firewood over from Puna for heating their cabin in Kauai or something like that. We just don't know why it's on those two islands. We do not see Leuco on Oahu. Oahu likewise only has had 6 detections, and all Huliohia. Molokai 0, Lanai 0 so far, but Kauai does. Symptoms, again, is this black staining in the sapwood. that's the real clear symptom of leukohea, and that's the fungal spores that you're seeing. Now, how does it work? As I said, it is a wound pathogen. The fungus needs a wound in the tree to infect it. If you spray the fungus on the bark, nothing happens. Bark is dead. Bark is like it's like your skin. If you get a cut, you're going to get an infection. If you stick your hand in the fresh water, but you don't have a cut, you're not going to get an infection. This tree, guys were going past and they noticed, hey, look at a bunch of looks like rod trees. They went over and looked at it. This was down in Kau where it's dry and there's no grass, and the goats were peeling the bark off the trees. These trees all got infected because the goats were peeling the bark off and injuring the trees. Now, this is a little bit of a complicated map, but this fits into the story that where you have a lot of feral animals damaging the trees, you see a lot more disease. This is the Kahuku section of Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. So what you see here is these two areas, fenced area, that's the national park. And as of 2018, they'd pretty much cleared all the ungulates out of the national park area. Here's the line of the border. And here over on the right side is the state forest where they have full of animals. It's managed for hunting, but not managed for protection from that. So you see there is many times more rod samples. Oh, and sorry, the dots are rod symptomatic trees from a helicopter survey. So the pink area was the area of the survey. These are rod symptomatic trees, and many of these were sampled and they're fine. Yep, that's rod, that's rod, that's rod. But what you're seeing is, in this case, I think there were 60 times more rod trees in the same forest open to ungulates as in protected from ungulates. So we're really seeing something that we can do about it, getting back to this idea that having goats, pigs, sheep, and cattle in the native forest is bad for the forest. When we've got rod, we see that those animals cause the wounding that allow the fungus to infect the trees. I want to throw out there's a little bit academic, but in plant disease, we think of something called the disease triangle. And to have a disease, a plant disease, you have to have the host species, what's going to get sick. You have to have the pathogen, in this case, a ceratocystis fungus, but you have to have the environment that allows disease. So if you can change the environment, you may not get the disease, even if the plant is there. And again, it's kind of like human health. I mean, there are pathogens, cold germs all around, but people that are healthy and good shape may not be getting the disease, whereas others that are not healthy, not doing well, they could get a disease. With fungus, I mean, what's a good environment for the disease? Warm and wet. Where do we see the most rod? Hilo and Puna, the warm, wet ohia forests on the island. The drier forests, we see a lot less. So if we go down to Ocean View on the south end in the dry ohia forest, it's there. I mean, we see trees scattered around the forest there, but it's not that kind of wholesale mortality that I showed you in the Pahoa slide in the beginning. Puawa doesn't have any, Puakaloa doesn't have any. Colder areas are seem to have less disease, although then it depends on levels of animals on it. But this pattern of more disease in areas with animals is repeated in many spots across the landscape. Another example is Hakalau Forest National Wildlife Refuge. The National Wildlife Refuge has a no animal tolerance policy, so they get rid of any pigs or goats or cattle in the forest. Adjacent to it is Hawaiian Homelands that has a large herd of cattle, feral cattle on their land. A whole lot of disease right up to the fence of Hakalau, no disease inside the wildlife refuge. So that pattern that we see over and over again in the land, and it's explained by these things in terms of what you can do to manage the environment and keeping ungulates out of the environment. So this is a photo up on Mauna Kea of an ohia forest that's had a lot of feral cattle, and you see the cattle are just barking the trees, and a lot of disease in that forest. How does it move around? It could move around with wood. Now, if you see all these logs, this was a landowner that all his ohia trees on his yard died. He cut them up and he burned them in his fireplace. Here, East Hawaii, sometimes it rains so much continuously that a wood fire just can dry things out and is nice. And that's a good use of it. He cut them up, burned it, and they're done. If he had given a bunch of firewood to his friend who brought it to Waimea, the friend would have been bringing it to Waimea. These logs on the upper right here now are were destined to go to Kauai from the Big Island. We tested them. We found they're full of the rod fungus. Well, we would have just shipped a bunch of the fungus up into Kokei for construction of a cabin there. So that's one avenue of movement. The important thing, though, that is a lot more difficult to control is that when the trees get diseased, they're attractive to these ambrosia beetles, these little boring beetles that bore into the trees here. And then they create this powder called frass. As they bore in, the frass comes out, and that is filled with fungal spores. The fungal spores themselves don't blow in the wind. They're not free-living spores. But if they're in beetle frass, then they blow up quite well, and they can blow around for miles. If they land on a wound, a broken branch or something like that, they can start a new infection there. If they fall on the ground, they'll be there in the soil. And there's an ongoing project right now looking at rod in the soil areas. So the fungus blowing around on these things is a major way it's moving at the several miles scale. We are working with some of the meteorologists to try to get some ideas. Could they blow to Maui? Is it realistic that a rod outbreak in Kohala could emit frass that would blow across the channel to Maui? When we only knew rod from the Big Island, that is what we expected with the next place it would show up, because it has moved from Puna to Hamakua to Kohala, and that's a longer distance than Kohala to Maui, right? So Puna to Kohala is further than Kohala to Maui. If it could blow to Kohala, the next jump would be to Maui, and we haven't seen that. We saw it on Kauai, so we're still really puzzled about that. Soil, again, in an infected stand, the spores are in the soil. You walk around, you drive your truck around, you move things around. And again, the load of spores is proportional load of mud. So your truck is going to carry a lot more mud than your feet are. Although if you look at this guy's shoes, it's also covered with seeds, so this is just the decontaminate decontaminate shoes, wheels, everything else like that for everything, for the seeds that you're moving around. God help you for little fire ants if you get little fire ants the way we do here. So half an hour is a short time to talk about rod. There are a lot of topics. I just grabbed a couple of the topics that there's ongoing progress that I wanted to bring out to you all. Are some mohia resistant? Sometimes we go in these forests and we say, hey, there's a healthy tree. What's wrong? What's with that? Maybe it's resistant to the disease, or maybe it's just lucky. Maybe all those other trees were barked by animals, but that one wasn't for some reason, and it's healthy. So what you have to do is you have to bring them in to cultivation and inoculate them to see. So the young guy on the left is Blaine Luis. He did his master's at UH Hilo looking at that, and he showed there are indeed some mohia that are resistant to rod. Even if you inoculate them, they don't die. They don't get the disease, they don't die. So he's led up a much larger program, and this is in our greenhouse here in Hilo, where they have hundreds and hundreds of either cuttings from healthy trees or seedlings. They're inoculating with it to try to develop. And so this picture I took a few weeks ago, this was, I'm going to say this was 3 months after they inoculated the trees with the pathogen. And you can see a whole bunch of them are dying. So those are not resistant, but the other ones still look healthy. And it's been 5 months now since they did. So there is potential for developing resistant lines of ohia. Surveying for rod, the ISCs, and so this is Big Island invasive species. The ISCs and DLNR, DOFAO do regular aerial surveys for symptomatic trees. Then they send out field crews to sample them, because sometimes they'll see a patch of dead ohia that died for some other reason. I remember one of our initial patches, we saw a patch of dead ohia, and we went there and, oh, there was a fire here. That's why they're dead. They go out, they do the samples, lab detection from the samples, and find it. And that's how they find some of these, some of the new outbreaks, like Kohala was found by the survey. The Maui one was found by someone who is in the conservation community, who went to his, I don't know, his cousin's farm or whatever, said, hey, that could be a rod tree. He found it. So that really points to the importance of keeping your eyes out for it. What we do on Hawaii Island, where we can do it, is fellow the infected trees to try to, if it's up in the air and the beetles are emitting the frass, it'll blow around a lot more. If you fell it, knock it down, maybe cover it with a tarp, that'll stop it from moving around as much, we hope. Kauai now is testing things. So what if you spray it with beetle repellent? Will that keep the beetles away and keep it from spreading in there? So stay tuned. That's an experiment that's just ongoing now. How do you protect forest? Don't move ohia. Now, Hawaii Island, it is prohibited to move ohia off, but not moving ohia wood around. This was a set of logs that was going to move from Hawaii Island to Oahu. We tested it. We found there was rot in it. Okay, you're not allowed to move. We can't move ohia plants off Hawaii Island. On Maui, if you want to plant an ohia, patronize one of your own nurseries. Don't buy you're not allowed to buy an ohia from Hawaii Island. I would not buy ohia from Kauai either. You know, patronize your own nursery there. Don't move ohia around. Department of Ag has been great in standing up for ohia in this, and they put in 2016 a ban on movement of ohia, even to the point of banning ohia lei. So you can't bring your ohia lei back from Merry Monarch. If you come here for Merry Monarch, which I think they are going to actually have a Merry Monarch, you can't bring your lei back after Merry Monarch, which is abundance of caution. Let me say that. Unless it's treated. Now, I don't want to get into the treatment, but we do find that heat kills the fungus. So kiln dried wood, like the flooring you see here, is good to go. There's no live fungus in kiln dried wood because it's heated. We are developing techniques. We have developed techniques that they're putting into production for drying entire posts and poles. So that would be a treatment that would then allow those posts to be moved without risk of spreading rot. Don't wound ohia, and this is the thing that we can really do something with. I don't think you have much of this on Maui. On Hawaii Island, we have hundreds of miles of roads that go through ohia forest. And when they do the road clearing, like look at this ohia on the left, that big spinning brush crunching machine just zipped and took off a huge wound on the ohia there. The lines crews top the trees because they're getting into the power lines. The other thing that we see that has been linked to rod is people out in the forest marking their trails with a machete. So don't do that. I mean, I used to do that as a young forester too. I would, if I were just in the forest, I wasn't following a trail, occasionally I'd chop a piece off a tree just so I could see the bark, see my trail, find my way back. Please don't do that. And we see these areas, some of these are trails that people frequently use, refresh the mark with a hatchet or a machete or whatever they're carrying. That can give trees rods, so don't do that. We recommend pruning seal when you have to prune a tree. It turns out it doesn't dissuade the beetles. Beetles go right through it, but it might stop the fungus from sporulating on the surface. But really getting back to the same thing the foresters, botanists and all have said about protecting the forest, you got to protect the ohia forest from cattle, goats, pigs, and sheep. That's really the best management thing that you can do to protect forests. Protecting the watershed, this is something that was referred to earlier today, but the top map here is a map of watershed recharge. That is how many inches a year water goes into the water table and recharges the aquifer. And so what you see is not surprising. All the watershed recharge is in the Mauka forested areas here. On East Maui and West Maui, it's on the upper areas. There's not watershed recharge going on in Kahului or Kihei or these places. It's dry. That's not where it's happening. Where it's happening is in these Mauka areas. And then if we look on this bottom map, this is a map of the native forest. Bingo. It's the native forest areas that protect the areas for the watershed recharge. So this is just really emphasizes the utility of protecting our forest, the importance of it, because that is indeed where the water's coming from, is those native forest areas. Cleaning shoes and gear, standard practice for any of the agencies, you know, cleaning not just your boots, but also your gear. I clean my chainsaw chaps, for goodness sakes. I never used to do such things as that. What works to sanitize things is rubbing alcohol, and this is what we use for any cutting tools. That bleach works, but you have to use it immediately once you mix it up. Otherwise, it ceases becoming. But really, the most effective, in fact, I'm going to change this, just eliminate bleach here, is rubbing alcohol. 70% or higher sterilizes it. Soap and water does not sterilize and does not necessarily kill the fungus. And then for vehicles, getting the mud off, really, I think it is complete overkill to try to like sanitize a vehicle with rubbing alcohol, but just getting the mud off. I mean, that's going to take rid of 99.999% of the problem. It's got to be something, the balance has got to be something that you're going to do at the end of the day. And the ISCs, like these guys here at Big Island Invasive Species, they take time at the end of the day, they plan out, okay, we're going to spend half an hour sanitizing our vehicles here and cleaning things out. You have to, if you're with a group or something like that, you have to plan out, time for your people to do it and make sure that that gets done. The other thing is, I tell people in sanitation vehicles, if your crew comes back, okay, we cleaned the vehicle, look at their knees. Did they get down and blast the mud out from under the vehicle, or did they just stand up and wash the hood? That doesn't help, right? So for the hands-on workshops on this, we demonstrate, okay, you got to get down on your hands and knees, blast the stuff out from underneath it to get the mud out that hangs out in the wheel wells and all. And, like anything, there are so many things that are similar with COVID, right? If you forget your mask one day, all right, but try to wear the mask, try to be careful of moving things around, just make things a habit, figure out for yourself and for your own agency, what's the balance between things that you're gonna do every day and the ideal. We don't want to insist on something that is perfect, but then people don't implement it because it's too hard to implement. If you see a suspect tree like this on Maui, let MISC or DOFO DLNR know. They will send someone out to sample it, send the lab here for it. And wait, you'll have to contact or let them contact the landowner, right? If it's on private land. If it's on state land, DOFO will go look at it. One of the encouraging things, to wrap up with some encouraging notes, one of the encouraging things we found is that even if you have rod in the area, seedlings don't seem to pick up the rod through the soil unless there's pigs. If there's pigs digging around, then all bets are off. But the fungus doesn't seem to be in the soil. The fungus doesn't seem to be getting into the tree from the soil. The roots don't just take it up. So unlike, say, nematodes or some other fungal issues, you can restore plants and then, keep on planting trees. And this is something that we hear on East Hawaii. We see everybody's got ohia in their yard, and people on other islands, I think, they just assume ohia can't grow in town because they don't see it. So these guys, the Ohia Legacy Initiative, this is just a nonprofit. They're trying to get more people on Oahu to plant ohia trees, and they grow out and give out thousands every year. So this is an Arbor Day thing they did, I think, 2 years ago, and they just got wiped out right away. So I mean, support your local nurseries. I know Maui, you are outstanding. That Maui Native is selling retail through True Value and Lowe's and the big box stores. The Maui Nui Botanical Garden has a lot of native plants, so plant something with it. This is a flight over the East Mauna Kea Forest on Hawaii Island. Most of our ohia forest is still healthy, and really our program is about keeping the forest healthy. I do want to thank our funders. We've had a lot of funding through a lot of sources. I mean, largely now it's the state and the U.S. Forest Service funding a lot of it, but a lot of private foundations stepped up right away when this started becoming a huge problem before we got the motion in for the state funding and such like that. There is a bill in front of the legislature for this year's appropriation, so we can continue doing things like the helicopter surveys. All that is almost, and this is common for conservation today. I'm a state employee on state salary to do this. Almost everybody working in conservation, though, is year-to-year funding on grants. So, continue to support for protection of our natural resources for all these different programs is really critical. Mahalo, that's my contact. Any questions about ROD, feel free to ask me. jbfriday@hawaii.edu is best. There's our website, there's our Facebook, there's our Instagram. And so follow us on these. And Hoku Pihana is my assistant. So let me see those questions if I could, and then All right, let me see if we got some questions here, and I'll keep sharing in case someone is interested in this.
Sure. Yeah, we have a question in the chat from, where did it go?
Merrill Rankin, excellent
Carol.
question. And the answer to that is no. The answer to that is, so one of our colleagues, Tom Harrington, is a geneticist, and he has, one of our colleagues, Tom Harrington, is a geneticist. And as you know, as something spreads, there's a level of mutations. So you can track what jumped from where. And the Kohala seems to have been one big jump. It didn't go Puna, Hilo, Hamakua, Kohala at all. It was a big jump.
Awesome. Any other questions for JB?
We have one on the Facebook Live.
Go
It
ahead.
says, should we encourage visitors from, excuse me, from Oahu to clean camping, hiking, outdoor gear with alcohol before visiting Maui?
Clean with soap and water. I'd say clean with soap and water. Alcohol is for like cutting tools, a chainsaw. And for something like a chainsaw, it's really better just to have a clean one and a dirty one. And you say, if this chainsaw gets used for rod, it's not going to get used for anything else. But soap and water, clean stuff for soap and water. And I'm not particularly worried about rod in that case, but weed seeds, I mean, I can't think off the top of the hand, but I'm sure that Oahu has weeds that you don't want on Maui. And also, sure, even if they just, even if they've just picked up Clydemia or something like that, and they're going into a pristine forest, you don't want that. So clean with soap and water, absolutely. Like Serena, I carry a brush and a spray bottle in my truck, just for use for things like that. Good practice for biosanitation is to start in pristine areas and move to dirty areas. So if your day is going to take you from Mauka to Makai, that's probably generally a good thing, because Mauka is the more pristine as you move to Makai. It's and I'm thinking of things like the ISKs that may have to do several stops in a day. But if you go the other way, then you've got to think of, if I've just gone off-road in Puna, do I really want to drive this muddy van up to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park? And the answer to that might be no. You might need to stop at a park. And I've done that too. I've kept if I know I'm doing that, I keep a hose and stop at a county park and hose out everything before I go up into the forest if I have to do that. Never liked that big mower used to clear roads. That thing is brutal. Now, if you are in charge of clearing roads, I would definitely want the big mower. But it's brutal on, and it's so ugly because it just leaves miles and miles of just shredded stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, JB, for ending. And I also want to plug his Instagram if you guys are on Instagram, because he covers so many great topics of plants, whether they're invasive or native or whatever else. But James_B_Friday. I would also plug that in there. I know I enjoy it.
Yeah, it's Invasive Species Awareness Month. So I haven't gotten every day, but I've been trying to throw up an invasive species a day. And then April's Native Plant Awareness Month, so I'll do a native plant today.
Yeah, and I think is it April 25th is Ohia Lehua Day. Yep.
Yeah, I think we're planning a live broadcast that day.
Awesome. Looks like there aren't any more questions in Facebook or Zoom. So I think we're right on time to start wrapping up.
Okay.
Mahalo nui, JB. The great presentation.